In the annals of history, one of the most discussed figures is Nerva, traditionally revered as the first of Rome's so-called five good emperors. However, a pertinent question arises: how justified is this high assessment of his reign? While he undoubtedly commanded deep respect within the Senate, a crucial factor in Roman politics, he never managed to secure the firm trust and loyalty of the legions, which ultimately led to him being perceived as a rather ineffective ruler of the empire. His legacy remains a subject of detailed study, balancing recognition of his noble intentions with an understanding of the limitations of his power. Nerva was born in Narnia in 30 AD, immediately placing him within the circle of ancient and highly influential Roman aristocracy. He hailed from a distinguished family whose roots ran deep in Rome's political life, evidenced by the fact that many of his ancestors and relatives held high senatorial positions. For decades, his family maintained close and often intimate ties with imperial power, ensuring them significant influence and security in the turbulent world of Roman politics. Nerva's father, for instance, was a close friend of Emperor Tiberius himself, and one of his maternal aunts could boast direct kinship with that powerful ruler, being his great-granddaughter. These connections not only granted Nerva privileges but also immersed him in the heart of the intrigues and dangers inherent in the imperial court. Nerva himself demonstrated his political acumen and loyalty by playing a key role in exposing Piso's large-scale conspiracy, which aimed to overthrow Emperor Nero in 65 AD. This act of loyalty earned him Nero's personal gratitude, expressed not only in words but also in tangible honors, including the erection of his statue in the imperial palace itself and other significant tokens of recognition. His family connections continued to expand and strengthen. Nerva's sister, Coxia, married Tatianus, who was Emperor Otho's brother. Such intertwinings of fates and kinship with several emperors, Tiberius, Nero, and Otho, made Nerva's position unique, yet incredibly vulnerable. Remarkably, despite these deep connections to dynasties that one after another fell victim to political upheavals, Nerva managed to survive the tumultuous year of the Four Emperors, a period of unprecedented chaos and bloodshed when power in Rome changed with dizzying speed. His ability to endure this maelstrom was itself a testament to his exceptional political acumen. He became one of the few honored with a consulship in 71 AD, underscoring his continued influence. Furthermore, Nerva developed close relations with Vespasian's son, Emperor Domitian, becoming his close friend and trusted advisor. Again, his loyalty was rewarded. He received a second consulship. Domitian, it seemed, trusted him implicitly, relying on him until the very end of his reign. However, as later transpired, this trust proved fatally misplaced, adding intrigue to his biography. Roman politics of that era was an extraordinarily dangerous and unpredictable undertaking, a labyrinth full of mines and hidden traps, where one misstep could cost a life. Astonishingly, Nerva seemed to navigate this minefield with mastery, avoiding the demise that befell so many others. His political life was marked by connections with nearly every emperor, starting with Tiberius, and most incredibly, he managed to outlive them all, remaining alive and even thriving under conditions that seemed incompatible with longevity. This phenomenon of his survival in such a ruthless world still evokes admiration and bewilderment, prompting reflection on his hidden talents and true role in these dramatic events. When Domitian fell by an assassin's hand in 96 AD, Nerva ascended to the throne as the new emperor of Rome. However, this choice was quite unexpected. By then, Nerva was an elderly man, over 60, with fragile health, and entirely unversed in military affairs. In fact, he had never been to the provinces or commanded legions, nor did he have direct heirs capable of inheriting the throne. Nerva's ascension was met with a degree of skepticism by the wider Roman public, so he took immediate steps to win their favor. These steps included generous cash distributions to citizens, as well as traditional gifts to the Praetorian Guard and soldiers.